I think it's fair to say that Alex Albon's career has been a bit of a roller coaster, and not just in terms of Formula 1 but motorsport in general. Before he joined Toro Rosso in 2019, he actually wasn't a Red Bull Junior anymore. He was dropped by the Red Bull program back in 2012 when both him and Sainz were part of the program, and so it's quite serendipitous that all these years later in 2025 they are now reuniting as teammates at Williams. But when he did eventually make the jump up to Formula 1, it was basically because Red Bull had a young driver drought. In 2017, they ran 4 different drivers in Carlos Sainz, Daniil Kvyat, Brendan Hartley, and Pierre Gasly, and when Ricciardo announced that he would leave Red Bull for 2019, he was replaced by Pierre Gasly, but Red Bull had to bring back Daniil Kvyat, who they had dropped 2 years earlier, and also decided to bring back Alex Albon because they didn't have any young drivers to make the jump up. It's incredible to think that Albon was never even meant to be going to Formula 1, as he had actually signed a contract with Nissan to race in Formula E for 2019. However, when Helmut Marko called him, you just can't say no to Formula 1. For someone who wasn't even meant to be racing in Formula 1, Alex Albon hit the ground running. In 12 races for Toro Rosso, he scored points 5 times, immediately justifying his promotion by Red Bull into F1 and also solidifying himself as a solid midfield driver. Off the back of this really strong start, after 12 races, he would be chosen to replace the struggling Pierre Gasly at Red Bull alongside Max Verstappen. In the latter half of the season, although he didn't blow anyone away, he was definitely solid and much better than Gasly was, and he had built up some real momentum at the back end of his rookie season in 2019, even being awarded as the Rookie of the Season ahead of Lando Norris and George Russell. Now, I described Alex's career as a roller coaster, and as much as everything was going up during his rookie season, 2020 is when everything would start to come crashing down. In 2020, he was dominated by Max Verstappen. Despite the fact that Alex actually has a very similar driving style to Max, he just couldn't cope with the sensitivity and instability of the Red Bull. Let's not forget that it was his second year in Formula 1, so he was nowhere near a developed enough driver both on track and also mentally. He was whitewashed by Max in qualifying by almost half a second, he only scored 2 podiums all season long, and he also scored less than half the points of Max. You could definitely tell, and I remember this vividly from that season, that in interviews after a bad race or a poor performance, there was no hiding the stress and the pressure that was on Alex's shoulders. If you compare that to Checo in recent years, Checo, because of his maturity and because of his experience, has always been a lot more combative in the media after criticism or pressure after a bad performance. You could just tell that Alex just didn't know how to cope with it. He didn't have answers for how to sort it, and to be honest, it was just really sad to watch a young driver go through that. We all knew that it was inevitable that he was going to lose his seat. However, Red Bull left it so late into 2020, announcing it in December, that there was no chance for him to find a seat for 2021. In the space of 2 years, he went from not even being considered for a Formula 1 seat to going to Red Bull as a rookie, and then being dropped by Red Bull without a seat for the following season. Luckily for Alex, he did kind of land on his feet being the Red Bull reserve driver, and he also tested the car numerous times throughout the season. And now, we know that 2021 was a crazy season for multiple reasons, but Alex was actually involved in one of the crazy stories because after Lewis and Max infamously collided in Silverstone, Red Bull used Alex to recreate some of Lewis Hamilton's lines during a filming day. Now, this is one of the craziest stories during that year amongst many others, but the good thing about Alex always being with the team, always being right there at the forefront, at the front lines with them in the garage, is that he was always in the public eye. He was never forgotten, and his name was always in contention for a seat in 2022. When Mercedes announced that George Russell would be replacing Valtteri Bottas, this opened up a seat at Williams. And now this actually became a bit of a battle in the background because there were 2 drivers gunning for that seat, one of them being Alex and the other one being Nick de Vries, who at that point was not only the reigning Formula E champion, but also a Mercedes Junior. And now, as we know, 2021 was a massive battle between Max and Lewis, but it was also a huge battle between the teams and also the team principals. Or what this meant is that Horner was backing Albon and Toto Wolff was backing Nyck de Vries. Jos Capito, the team principal of Williams at the time, went with Alex Albon, and Alex himself even said that Christian Horner was instrumental in negotiating him going there. The last 3 years have been all about Alex rebuilding his reputation and re-establishing himself on the Formula 1 grid. Rightly or wrongly, when you are dropped by a team and are out of Formula 1, you are essentially damaged goods in the eyes of many fans. However, over the last 3 years, Alex has absolutely re-established himself as one of the most dependable drivers in the midfield. He has become indispensable to Williams because without him over the past few years, there is a realistic world where Williams finished last in the championship for the past 3 seasons. 2023 was Williams' most competitive season where they also had their best car. That was Alex's best season to date. His points alone were good enough to help Williams finish 7th in the Constructors' Championship, and it was actually their best season since 2017. The one race that I think just epitomizes Albon's time at Williams was the 2023 Canadian Grand Prix. That was the race where the team brought just one set of brand new upgrades, meaning that there was a lot of pressure on Alex to not crash, and in mixed conditions throughout the weekend which were very tricky and under massive pressure from the team, he would go on to finish 7th in the race. What Alex Albon has done on track and James Vowles has done off track to turn Williams around and just inject a brand new energy and brand new enthusiasm for the future into this team is just incredible. In 2023, it got to the point where Alex was performing so well that there was even links to a potential move to Ferrari, ironically to replace Carlos Sainz. However, despite all of the positivity and the way that Alex hit the ground running when he came back to Formula 1, there has been a massive elephant in the room when it comes to Williams, and that has been Alex's teammates. I am fairly comfortable in saying that Alex has had the 2 worst drivers over the past 3 years as his teammates. And now, in fairness to Alex, he has done exactly what he has needed to in dominating both Nicholas Latifi and Logan Sargeant. Up against Latifi in 2022, he outqualified him 19-2, and up against Sargeant, he never once got outqualified by him. Logan himself only managed to score 1 point in 2 years, so when you talk about benchmarking how good Albon has been, it is definitely difficult to do that because it's important not to undermine the level that Albon has been performing at and the results that he has achieved, especially when you consider how badly Williams was struggling before 2022. But at the same time, he hasn't beaten anyone even remotely good in the same car. What happened at the end of last year when Franco Colapinto came into the team, I think was very eye-opening because I do think that to an extent Albon had maybe started to take his position for granted. I think he started to get a little bit too comfortable in that team with the really poor level of teammates that he had, and when Franco came in with this incredible speed and this tenacity, although he did have a messy end to the year with quite a few crashes, he was able to put Alex under pressure. For the first time in 2 years, Alex was outqualified by a teammate, and as we saw in Singapore, when Franco sent it down the inside with a very aggressive move on his teammate, Albon was a little bit rattled. I think Alex needed a wake-up call like Franco, and with Sainz now joining the team, I think it's the right time for a driver that good to push Alex even more and help him develop as a driver. It's very rare that a driver as good as Carlos Sainz, still at the peak of his powers, actually goes from a race-winning team, a team like Ferrari of all teams, down to a team like Williams. He is definitely a better driver than what Williams' performance deserves, but the combination of Albon and Sainz, in my opinion outside of the top 4 teams, is easily the best driver lineup on the grid. And now, Carlos unfortunately didn't exactly have a lot of choice because last year he literally had the pick of the 4 worst teams in Formula 1 in Sauber, Williams, Haas and Alpine. He believed in the Williams project. He believed in the work that James Vowles was doing behind the scenes in trying to modernize the team, trying to improve their processes both on the technical side and also on the commercial side, which is going to future-proof the team ahead of 2026. Sainz is going to be a world-class benchmark for Albon and easily the best teammate he's had since Max Verstappen. When you look at what Sainz was able to achieve in his time at Ferrari up against Leclerc, he was basically able to beat Charles about a third of the time. When you consider that Leclerc, I think we all think is going to be a future world champion, that's an incredible record, and that is why Sainz is such a good driver. I honestly think that Sainz should be beating Albon in his very first season at the team, and if that doesn't happen, I think that's going to be a massive surprise and a massive credit to Alex. What their relationship is going to be is also something I'm looking forward to because it is going to be tested. I'm looking forward to seeing whether it's going to be more of a competitive and spiky environment because we know that both of them do have that in their locker, or whether it's just going to be a purely cooperative environment working solely for the team. I would never say that either of these two drivers are toxic characters within a team. They both have incredible relationships with pretty much all of the teams that they have raced at. Carlos Sainz is such a hard worker and such a great driver that he was loved at McLaren, he was really loved at Ferrari, and it's just unfortunate circumstances that he had to be kicked out of the team basically to make way for Lewis. Even when it comes to Alex, as bad as it got with Red Bull, they were invested in trying to get him back onto the grid, and I'm sure that there is lines of communication that maybe in the future could see him back in Red Bull. However, having said that, they have also shown signs of frustration towards their teammates at times. When it comes to Sainz and Leclerc, there was definitely sometimes friction more on track than anything else, especially when Sainz went against the team in terms of strategy, and as we saw with Albon last year, there was just slight hints of frustration when Colapinto was starting to push him. I expect both of these drivers to basically be at their absolute best from day one. Even though Albon is the incumbent and he's already settled into the culture and the environment, I don't think that he can rely on that being an advantage for very long because Sainz is highly adaptable, both in terms of his driving with different cars and also as a teammate and person within the team. I'm sure Sainz is already very settled within the environment and the culture and the people that he's going to be working with. I just don't expect for Sainz to take 2, 5, 6 or 10 races to get back to his best because he is a quality driver and quality drivers always hit the ground running. If Alex Albon is able to beat Carlos Sainz, it would literally make his career because we would have to reevaluate exactly where we would rank him amongst some of the best drivers on the grid. Even though I think that it is unlikely, I just can't wait to see the rivalry between these two drivers because as long as it doesn't compromise the performance of the team, I think that we might see them butt heads at some point because they are massively competitive up against each other and they also know exactly what it would mean for their careers to be beaten by the other. James Vowles is going to have a difficult job and a big responsibility in trying to control his two drivers. There is plenty of egos when it comes to racing drivers, and again, given what's on the line and what someone like Alex Albon potentially could prove to the world if he does beat Carlos Sainz, James Vowles is going to have to try to control his own driver's ambitions to make sure that it doesn't get in the way of the team's objectives. Well, there you have it. If you did enjoy this video and want to support the channel, then don't forget to subscribe, that would be massively appreciated, and I'll see you in the next one.